200. That is the number that should keep you awake. Not one rebel angel, not a single shadow slipping its leash in the dark. 200 of them descending together onto one mountain with a plan. The oldest accounts describe a moment when heaven's own watchmen looked down at the daughters of men and decided the boundary between worlds was theirs to cross. And before they crossed it, they did something that tells you everything about what kind of beings they were. They swore an oath. This is the story of Mount Hermon, the night the sky came down, and the vow that made it impossible to turn back. Genesis 6 opens the door with a single staggering sentence. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. A handful of words, that is almost all the Bible gives you, set down quietly, as if the writer could barely stand to dwell on it. For centuries, people have argued over one phrase in that passage, the sons of God. Who were they? The oldest interpretation, the one the Book of Enoch states plainly, is also the most unsettling. They were angels, heavenly beings, members of God's own court who left their proper place and came down to take what was never theirs to take. And the Book of Enoch does not leave it at a sentence. It slows the catastrophe down and shows you the machinery underneath. What it describes is not a moment of weakness. It was a conspiracy. The Watchers, that was their name, and the name is the first clue. They were not called the Destroyers. They were not called the Rebels. They were called the Watchers because watching was their assignment. They were heaven's observers, stationed over the young world to guard it, to witness it, to keep it. Picture a sentinel set on a wall through the long night, not to enter the city, only to watch over it until morning. That was their station. That was their entire purpose. And they abandoned it. Heaven sent them to watch over mankind. Instead, mankind would watch the Watchers fall. The Book of Enoch names their leader, Semyaza, and it preserves what he said to the others because he understood something about guilt. He was afraid, not of God, not yet, but of his own followers. He feared that when the moment came, he would be the only one to go through with it, and that he alone would bear the punishment for a sin the rest of them had merely dreamed about. So he made them swear. Imagine standing among them, 200 beings of fire and will gathered on the heights, each one hesitating at the edge of a choice that cannot be reversed. And their leader turns and says, "I will only do this if you bind yourselves to me. Swear it. Every one of you, so the guilt falls on all of us alike, and no single one can ever claim he is clean." And they did. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers binding themselves by a mutual oath, swearing together that they would see it through, whatever came. They chained themselves to one another with a promise, so that retreat became betrayal and the only way left was down. That is why this was not a fall. A fall is an accident. A fall is a slip, a stumble, a moment of weakness a being might regret the instant it happens. What took place on that mountain was the opposite of an accident. It was deliberation. It was organization. It was 200 immortals talking themselves into damnation and then sealing the contract in their own resolve. They watched the daughters of men. They wanted them, and then they came down to take them. Not sometimes, not a handful of them. All 200 together in a single act of will, and the place they chose tells you they knew exactly what they were doing. Mount Hermon. It still stands today, on the border between Lebanon and Syria, its summit rising more than 2,800 meters into the sky, high enough that snow clings to its peak through the burning Middle Eastern summer. Its meltwater feeds the Jordan, the river that runs through the whole of Scripture. Picture the tallest mountain for hundreds of miles in every direction, a white crown visible from a vast distance. The natural meeting point between the heavens and the earth. If you were a being descending from the sky, choosing the one place on the young world that came closest to touching heaven, you would choose Hermon. And the Book of Enoch tells us the mountain itself became a monument to the crime. They named that summit for the curse they swore upon it, the mountain of the oath, the place of the binding. The crime is written into the map. To this day, the mountain carries the memory of the night the Watchers came down. The texts even mark the moment in time. The Book of Enoch says they descended in the days of Jared, and here is a detail almost no one notices. a small thing hiding in a list of names that turns out to be the hinge of the entire story. Jared was the 6th generation from Adam. 6 generations down from the first man, the sky opened. Hold that name, Jared, because the one who would carry heaven's verdict back to these very angels had not yet been born. He was coming, and he was coming from Jared's own house. Now picture the descent itself, 200 points of light breaking through the clouds above that snow-crowned peak. Not the soft glow you imagine when you hear the word angel, but something vast and burning and purposeful coming down with intent. The ground would have trembled, the air itself would have changed. And in the villages below, in the green valleys fed by that mountain's rivers, ordinary people looked up and saw their gods arriving, because that is how the Watchers would have appeared. Not as monsters, as gods. Beautiful, radiant, impossibly powerful, beings who could teach and heal and reveal secrets no human had ever dreamed. Imagine being one of those villagers. Imagine the most beautiful and powerful being you have ever seen descending from the holy mountain and choosing you. How many would have said no? And this is the reframe that should stop you cold. The danger of the Watchers was never that they looked evil. It was that they looked divine. They did not come to frighten mankind into submission. They came to be wanted. They offered knowledge and beauty and power. And they asked only that the boundary between heaven and earth be torn down forever. The Book of Jubilees adds its own testimony. It describes how the angels first came down with a purpose that seemed almost noble, to teach the children of men, to instruct mankind in what was right. But somewhere on the way down, the mission curdled. The teachers became predators, the guardians became invaders. What began as instruction ended as the corruption of everything they touched. And the Book of Jasher remembers the same descent from the human side. A world in which the sons of God took wives from the daughters of men, and the order of creation began to bend and break beneath the weight of a union that was never meant to be. Because that is what the oath on Hermon truly was. It was not romance. It was not even rebellion in the ordinary sense. It was the deliberate mixing of two things God had set apart: heaven and earth, the immortal and the mortal, the spirit and the flesh. 200 beings looked at a line drawn by their Creator and swore together to cross it. And once they crossed, the binding held. The oath Semyaza forced upon them did exactly what he intended. Not one of them could turn back, because turning back meant breaking faith with the other 199. They had made retreat impossible. They had built a cage out of their own promise and locked themselves inside it. That same binding would follow them to the end. The vow they swore to bind themselves together would become the chains that bound them in the dark. The oath was the first link. The judgment would be the last. But that reckoning is still ahead of us this season. The day the archangels look down and the verdict falls, and 200 immortals learn that the boundary they tore down carried a price none of them had counted. And remember the name I asked you to hold: Jared, the generation when the sky came down. His son would be born into a world already poisoned by the Watcher's arrival, a boy who would grow up amid the consequences of that oath, walking a corrupted earth, and who would walk so closely with God that God would take him, alive, into the heavens. His name was Enoch. The very generation the Watchers chose to invade produced the one man who would stand before them and read them their sentence. They came down to rule over mankind, and mankind's answer was already being born in the house next door. So why should a vow sworn on a mountain thousands of years ago still matter to you now, watching this? Because the oath on Hermon is the oldest account we have of a truth you already know in your own life: that the most dangerous step is rarely the one taken in ignorance. It is the one taken deliberately, with full knowledge, bound to others, where turning back would cost more than going forward. The Watchers did not fall because they were tricked. They fell because they decided, and then they made the decision impossible to undo. Every one of us has stood, in some smaller way, at the foot of our own Hermon. A threshold we knew we should not cross, talking ourselves across it anyway. The Watchers crossed theirs 200 strong, and the world has been living with the consequences ever since. You are hearing this story now for a reason. The boundary they tore down was never fully rebuilt. The old powers did not vanish. They were only chained, only buried, only forgotten. And the deeper you follow their trail, the clearer it becomes that the ancient world was far stranger and far closer than you were ever told. Subscribe to History Remembered and keep following the trail with us, because 200 angels swore an oath on a mountain, and we are only at the beginning of what that oath unleashed. But the story doesn't end here. 200 watchers swore the same oath, yet one name rises above all the rest. One angel that heaven itself would single out and blame for the ruin of the whole earth.